Imagine this: you're 70 years old, sitting in a quiet room as the golden afternoon sunlight filters through the window, casting a soft glow on everything around you. You glance around, the four walls that have silently witnessed your entire life, from your happiest moments to your deepest sorrows. And in this stillness, memories begin to flood in. What do you see? A life filled with love, deep connections, and cherished moments, or a timeline marked by stress, relentless ambition, and the pursuit of things you once thought mattered, only to realize, in the end, they didn't bring you real happiness. Be honest with yourself. When you look back, do you feel a sense of pride for the life you've lived? Or is there a lingering regret? The moments you missed because you were too busy. The people you loved but didn't spend enough time with. The dreams you once held close but let slip away because life kept pulling you in another direction. We tell ourselves that happiness lies somewhere ahead, just one more goal, one more milestone, one more achievement away. Once I get there, we say, I'll finally feel at peace. But the truth is, that moment never really comes. The goalpost keeps moving. Every time we reach one finish line, another appears, and so, we keep running, believing that at the end of it all, we'll find something worth the chase. But the greatest tragedy, we rarely stop to ask if we're even running in the right direction. We spend our best years chasing things that don't last, only to realize too late that what truly mattered, the small moments, the warm embraces, the laughter shared with loved ones, was left behind, unnoticed and unappreciated. But the scariest thing is not realizing this, it's realizing it when it's too late. Buddhism teaches that life is impermanent. But impermanence isn't something to fear, it's a reminder not to waste the time we have. Everything changes. Time moves forward. And the things we take for granted, our health, our opportunities, the people we love, won't always be here. We can't hold on to everything. But we can wake up right now and start living more meaningfully. So why wait until you're 70 to learn these lessons? Why let time slip through your fingers before you finally understand what truly matters? If we can recognize these truths now, we can change course, we can live a life that isn't just long, but truly fulfilling. Today, we'll uncover 9 profound truths, lessons that, if learned early, can transform the way you live, love, and find meaning in the world. These aren't abstract philosophies or feel-good ideas. They are timeless truths, shaped by wisdom and experience, that everyone comes to understand eventually. The question is, will you wait until it's too late? Or will you start now? Let's begin this journey, one that just might change the way you see life forever. 1. The illusion of status. For much of our lives, we chase the idea of success as if it is the ultimate destination. We push forward relentlessly, believing that the right title, the next promotion, or the recognition from our peers will bring us the deep fulfillment we crave. Society encourages this pursuit. It tells us that our worth is measured by what we achieve, by the weight of our name in boardrooms, by the prestige of our accomplishments. And so, we dedicate years, sometimes decades, to climbing the ladder, mistaking external validation for inner peace. But peace never comes. There is always another goal to reach, another level to attain. The moment we accomplish something, we feel an initial rush of satisfaction, but it fades quickly, replaced by a restless hunger for more. We tell ourselves that we will slow down once we reach the top, that we will finally enjoy life once we have secured our legacy. But the truth is, The top is an illusion, a moving horizon that never lets us rest. And then, one day, the world moves on without us. It happens subtly at first. Younger colleagues take on more responsibility. The emails slow down. The decisions you once made with confidence are now handled by someone else. Then comes retirement, the moment that once seemed distant, almost unreal. The company thanks you, hands you a commemorative plaque. And within months, you are replaced. The phone calls stop. The world that once revolved around your leadership continues just fine without you. And in that quiet, a question begins to form: who am I without my work? Without my title? Without the importance I once held? Robert had spent 4 decades building an identity that revolved around his career. He had sacrificed weekends, late nights, and even relationships for the sake of professional success. His name carried weight in the industry. Executives listened when he spoke. His presence commanded attention. And then, he retired. At first, he clung to the identity he had known for so long. He continued wearing his tailored suits, answering emails, waiting for invitations to meetings that never came. But slowly, reality settled in. The world was moving forward, and he was no longer at the center of it. One morning, restless and uncertain, he took a walk through his neighborhood and stumbled upon a small Buddhist temple. The sound of sweeping filled the courtyard as monks moved rhythmically, their expressions serene. No one turned to acknowledge him. No one whispered about his accomplishments. For the first time in years, he felt invisible. And yet, in that invisibility, something shifted. He sat in silence, watching the monks. They had no titles, no prestige, no symbols of power. And yet, they moved with such intention, spoke with such kindness, existed with such peace. There was a presence in them that he had never felt in all his years of success. A monk sat beside him, sensing his unease. In a soft voice, he said, "Your worth was never in your title. It was in the way you treated people, in the kindness you shared, in the wisdom you passed on." Robert had spent his life believing that his value was tied to his role, to the influence he wielded. But in that moment, he understood something he had never fully grasped: status was an illusion. The things he had spent decades chasing were impermanent. They had disappeared the moment he stepped away from the office. And yet, what remained? His ability to mentor, to love, to share wisdom, had always been his true legacy. He stopped introducing himself as a former CEO. Instead, he became a mentor to young professionals, guiding them toward something greater than status, toward purpose. He spent time with his family in ways he never had before, realizing that the moments he had once brushed aside in pursuit of success were, in fact, the real success. He saw clearly now what he wished he had seen before: we are not what we achieve. We are not our titles, our accolades, or the power we once held. Who we are at our core, the values we uphold, the love we share, the wisdom we pass on, is what truly defines us. It is a realization that comes for all of us, sooner or later. The question is, will we see it before it's too late? Because the moment we stop chasing status and start nurturing our souls, we step onto the path of true fulfillment. 2. Freedom from others' opinions. From the moment we are born, we begin absorbing the silent rules of the world around us. We learn what is expected, what is admired, what is considered right. As children, We seek the approval of our parents, believing that their praise is proof of our worth. In school, we learn to measure ourselves through the eyes of teachers, classmates, and society at large. Every choice, what we wear, how we speak, the path we take, is subtly shaped by an invisible force, the need to be accepted. And so, we conform. We mold ourselves into versions of who we think we are supposed to be. We suppress dreams that seem impractical, swallow words that might invite judgment, and make decisions that are not truly ours. All because, deep down, we are afraid of being seen as different, afraid of being wrong, afraid of disappointing those around us. But time has a way of stripping away illusions. By the time we reach 70, something shifts. We begin to see what was always there but was too frightening to acknowledge. Most people were never really thinking about us at all. They were too busy worrying about their own lives, their own insecurities, their own battles. The judgment we feared was often fleeting, a passing thought lost in the vast landscape of someone else's concerns. The approval we craved came from people who, more often than not, were too wrapped up in their own struggles to be deeply invested in ours. Thomas learned this truth later than he wished. He had spent his entire life chasing validation. He was the model son, the high-achieving student, the ambitious professional. He pursued a career in law, not because it stirred his soul, but because it impressed others. He carefully crafted an image of success, ensuring that everything from the clothes he wore to the car he drove aligned with society's definition of achievement. And yet, he felt empty. Then, one evening, he attended his high school reunion. He arrived confident, ready to impress, ready to reaffirm his place among those who had once known him as the golden boy. But something unexpected happened. No one was particularly interested in his career. No one asked about his prestigious law firm, his expensive car, or the sacrifices he had made to climb the corporate ladder. His classmates were talking about their lives, their health, their children, their regrets. And in that moment, Thomas felt something he had never felt before: irrelevance. Not because he was unimportant, but because the thing he had spent his life building, his carefully curated identity, did not matter to anyone but himself. That night, as he drove home, the weight of realization settled deep into his bones. He had shaped his entire existence around the approval of people who were never truly paying attention. And he was exhausted. The next morning, he made a decision. He quit the high-pressure job that had drained him for decades. He sold the house that had been more of a status symbol than a home. He packed his belongings and moved to a small coastal town where no one knew his name. No one cared about his credentials. And no one had expectations of him. And for the first time in his life, he started doing things for himself. He took up woodworking, a childhood passion he had buried because it didn't seem prestigious enough. He spent hours carving, not for recognition or money, but for the sheer joy of creation. He met people who valued him not for what he had done, but for who he was. One afternoon, as he was working in his small shop, a traveler stopped to admire his carvings. "Are you a famous sculptor?" the man asked. Thomas smiled. "I used to be a lawyer. But that was someone else's dream, not mine." For the first time, he felt free. Because freedom isn't found in the approval of others. It isn't found in being liked, in being admired, or in meeting expectations that were never truly ours to begin with. It is found in living on our own terms. Most of us don't realize how much of our lives are dictated by unseen pressures, expectations passed down from parents, Societal norms that tell us what success should look like. Silent judgments that nudge us in directions we never truly chose. And yet, at the end of life, none of it matters. No one will remember how impressive you were. No one will recall whether your house was grand or modest. Whether your job title carried weight. Whether your choices were acceptable in the eyes of the world. What they will remember is who you were. Did you live with authenticity? Did you chase dreams that were truly yours? Did you speak your truth? Love fully? And embrace life with all its imperfections? Imagine an elderly woman. Her hands covered in paint as she loses herself in the joy of creation. She does not care whether her art is good by society's standards. She paints because it makes her heart feel alive. Imagine a man standing at the edge of the ocean, no longer burdened by the weight of proving himself. He breathes deeply, feeling the wind against his skin, knowing that he is finally living, not for applause, not for admiration, but for himself. This is the freedom we spend our whole lives searching for. And the tragedy is, many of us don't claim it until the very end. So why wait? Why waste another moment shaping yourself around expectations that were never yours to begin with? No one is thinking about you as much as you think they are. So live for yourself. 3. The pointlessness of holding grudges. For so much of our lives, we hold on to pain as if it protects us. We clutch our grudges like armor, believing that our resentment serves as a form of justice. Someone hurt us, betrayed us, wronged us in a way that we cannot forget, and so we keep the wound open. As if our refusal to forgive will somehow balance the scales. But time reveals a different truth. Holding on to anger doesn't punish the other person. It doesn't undo what happened. It doesn't change the past. It only poisons us. And yet, we resist letting go. We tell ourselves that if we release the grudge, it means excusing the wrongdoing, absolving the person who hurt us. But that is an illusion. Forgiveness has never been about the other person, it has always been about freeing ourselves. George knew this pain intimately. For decades, he carried a grudge so heavy that he barely noticed how much weight it had added to his soul. It was an old betrayal. One he never spoke about but never forgot. A friend, once closer than a brother, had hurt him in a way he couldn't forgive. Years passed, and life moved on. But George didn't. Whenever that man's name was mentioned, George's chest would tighten. His face would harden. He could feel the anger simmer beneath the surface. As fresh as the day it all happened, he told himself he didn't care anymore. But his body betrayed him. He was still carrying it. Then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. George was sitting on his porch when he overheard his grandson playing in the yard. A small argument had erupted between the boy and his best friend. And then he heard it, words that stopped him cold. "I'll never forgive you." George's breath caught in his throat. In an instant, he saw himself in that child, the same rigid stubbornness, the same refusal to let go, the same weight pressing down on a heart that was far too young to carry it. That night, George sat his grandson down and told him a story. There was once a foolish man who carried a sack of stones. Each stone represented a past hurt, an injustice, a slight. The man refused to set the sack down, convinced that holding on to it would somehow make things right. But as the years passed, the weight of the sack grew heavier. His back bent under its burden. His spirit grew weary. And one day, in his final moments, he realized the truth. He had wasted his entire life carrying a burden he could have set down at any time. The boy's eyes widened as he listened. Then, after a long pause, he asked softly, "What happened to the old man?" George exhaled slowly, feeling the depth of the lesson in his own bones. "He realized it too late," he said. "But we don't have to make the same mistake." The next morning, George did something he never thought he would do. He picked up the phone. His fingers hovered over the dial for a long time. The number was still memorized. Though he had never used it, he hesitated. But then, with a deep breath, he pressed the call button. The voice on the other end was older, softer, unfamiliar yet deeply familiar. And in that moment, George did something even more unexpected. He let go. And for the first time in decades, he felt light again. Because forgiveness isn't about saying that what happened was okay. It isn't about forgetting. It isn't about pretending the pain never existed. It is about choosing not to carry it anymore. Think about all the time we waste replaying old wounds, reliving arguments, rehearsing things we wish we had said. We tell ourselves we're protecting ourselves. But in truth, we are keeping the wound fresh, never allowing it to heal. Imagine an old woman sitting by the ocean, watching as the tide washes away footprints in the sand. She writes the name of someone who once hurt her. And as the waves crash against the shore, she watches it disappear, swallowed by the vastness of the sea. She could have held onto the pain, could have carved those wounds into stone, but she chose to write them in the sand, knowing that life moves forward. And so should we. Forgiveness is not for them, it is for you. Set down the burden before it breaks you. 4. The emptiness of material possessions. For so many years, we believe that more is better. A bigger house means we've made it. A luxury car signals success. The right brand of clothing, the expensive watch, the rare collection, each possession whispers to the world, "Look how far I've come." And so, we chase. We push ourselves to earn more, to buy more, to accumulate more. We tell ourselves that when we finally have enough money, enough recognition, enough symbols of success, we'll be able to relax. But how much is enough? A strange thing happens as we age. The things we once craved lose their shine. The clothes that once made us feel powerful now sit untouched in the closet. The house we fought so hard to afford starts to feel too big, too empty. The luxury car sits in the driveway, but there's nowhere urgent left to go. And we begin to ask ourselves a question we never stopped to consider before. Did any of this ever truly matter? Henry had spent his entire life believing that wealth was the answer, born into poverty. He had sworn to himself as a young boy that he would never feel that helpless again. He worked tirelessly, sacrificed everything, his time, his health, his relationships, to build an empire. And he succeeded. By his 50s, he was a self-made millionaire. His estate was enormous, his cars expensive, his bank account overflowing. But something never quite felt right. One day, Henry decided to visit an old friend, Samuel. Samuel had lived a very different life. He had never been wealthy, had never climbed the ladder of success in the way Henry had. Instead, he had worked as a teacher, lived in a small but cozy home, and spent his days surrounded by family and friends. As Henry sat in Samuel's modest living room, something caught his eye: an old, worn-out armchair in the corner. Its fabric was faded, its edges frayed. It looked as though it should have been replaced years ago. Curious, Henry asked, "Why do you still have this thing?" Samuel chuckled. shaking his head. "This chair has seen more joy than all of my riches ever could." Henry frowned, unsure what he meant. Samuel continued. "This is where my grandchildren sit while I tell them stories. It's where my wife used to curl up in the evenings, knitting while she hummed old songs. It's where friends have sat, crying on my shoulder, laughing over memories. It's just a chair. Yes. But it holds more life than anything money could ever buy." Henry didn't know what to say. That night, as he walked through his grand estate, he saw it for what it truly was, a museum of achievements. A collection of things that had once felt important, but now felt meaningless. His mansion, once a symbol of success, now felt cavernous, cold. His luxury cars, once a source of pride, now seemed like toys for a younger man trying to prove something. His expensive furniture, his designer suits, his rare collections, none of them brought warmth. None of them carried memories. None of them filled the emptiness inside him. And suddenly, he saw what Samuel had seen all along. Wealth was never about what we own. It was about the moments we share. Think about the things that truly matter at the end of life. No one lies on their deathbed wishing they had bought more things. No one spends their final moments reminiscing about the luxury car they once drove or the brand of suit they wore to important meetings. They think about love. About laughter around the dinner table. About the people who made life meaningful. About the memories that made it all worthwhile. Possessions can bring temporary joy, but they can never hold you in a time of sorrow. They can never replace a heartfelt conversation, a child's laughter, the warmth of an embrace. We spend so much time accumulating that we forget the real measure of a life well lived. Imagine an elderly woman in a small, cluttered kitchen, stirring a pot of soup while her grandchildren chatter around her. She has no diamonds, no designer clothes, no grand estate, but she is rich, rich in love, in memories, in moments. Henry realized, too late, that he had spent years building a fortune, but never truly built a home. So he changed. He downsized his mansion, moved into a smaller, warmer space where his children and grandchildren felt comfortable visiting. He gave away much of his wealth, not because he no longer valued money, but because he finally understood its real purpose. He funded scholarships, supported community projects, helped those in need, and for the first time in his life, he felt wealthy in a way that money could never provide. Buddhism teaches impermanence, the understanding that nothing lasts forever. Not our possessions, not our status, not even our bodies. Everything we cling to will one day be left behind. What remains is not what we owned. It's how we lived. True wealth is not measured by the things we acquire, but by the love we give, the kindness we show, and the lives we touch. Because in the end, it was never about what we had. It was always about who we were. 5. The fleeting nature of time. We live our lives as if time is something we own. We act as if we can store it away, as if we can save it for later, as if it will always be there waiting for us when we're ready. And so, we postpone. We tell ourselves there will be time to follow our passions, time to mend broken relationships, time to finally live the way we've always wanted. But life doesn't wait. Time is not a possession. It is a river, always moving forward. Whether we are ready or not, we assume we can negotiate with it, that we can put off the things that truly matter until we feel prepared. But time is indifferent to our plans. One day, we wake up and realize that what we thought was abundant was, in fact, slipping through our fingers all along. Arthur spent his entire life believing he had time. As a young man, he dreamed of learning to play the piano. He imagined composing music, melodies that would capture the emotions he could never quite put into words. He could almost hear them in his mind, as if they were waiting for him. But there was always something else that needed his attention. His job. His responsibilities. The belief that one day, when things settled down, he would finally have the time to sit at the piano and bring his music to life. "I'll start next year," he told himself. But next year became the year after. And then another. And another. Decades passed. And Arthur found himself at 75, staring at the old upright piano in his living room. It had been there for years, collecting dust. A silent witness to all the excuses he had made. He sat down, resting his hands on the keys. His fingers, once strong and steady, now trembled slightly with age. He sighed. The music was still inside him, but his hands no longer moved the way they once did. Regret settled deep into his bones. Then, one evening, his granddaughter visited. She had recently taken up the violin and spoke excitedly about music, how it made her feel alive, how every note told a story. Arthur listened, a bittersweet smile on his lips. She asked him, "Did you ever play an instrument, Grandpa?" For the first time in years, he admitted his old dream. "Then why don't you start now?" she asked, tilting her head in curiosity. Arthur chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm too old for that now. My hands aren't what they used to be." But his granddaughter, with all the innocence and wisdom of youth, simply shrugged. "So, you still have today." That night, long after she had left, Arthur found himself sitting at the piano once again. He ran his fingers over the keys, feeling the cool smoothness beneath his touch. Tentatively, he pressed one down. A single note echoed through the room. Then another. And another. It was slow, clumsy, nothing like the melodies he had once imagined. But it was something. And as he played, he realized he still had time. At least for this moment. We live as if we are guaranteed endless tomorrows. We assume that the people we love will always be there, that opportunities will wait for us, that someday, when we're ready, when the timing is right, we'll finally do all the things we've put off. But someday is not a guarantee. It is a gamble. How many people have left this world with words unspoken, with dreams unfulfilled, with regret as their final companion? We don't realize the urgency of time until we see it running out. We say we'll call someone tomorrow. But what if tomorrow never comes? We say we'll apologize later. But what if later is too late? We say we'll pursue our passions when we have more time. But what if this moment is all we have? Imagine an old woman sitting by the window, watching the rain fall. She thinks about a letter she always meant to send, a reconciliation she never made, a trip she always postponed. But time has moved forward. Indifferent to her regrets. The friend is gone. The moment has passed. And all that remains is the aching realization that she waited too long. If you knew you had just 1 year left to live, what would you do differently? If you had 1 month, 1 week, 1 day, what are you postponing that shouldn't wait? We always think we have more time. But the only time we ever truly have is this moment. Right now. So don't wait. Don't wait to say what needs to be said. Don't wait to chase what sets your heart on fire. Don't wait to live the way you were meant to live. Because one day, The time we thought we had will be gone. 6. Health is the real wealth. When we are young, we treat our bodies as if they are invincible. We stay up late, push past exhaustion, fuel ourselves with caffeine and convenience, and assume that our health will always be there, waiting for us. We ignore the small aches, the occasional fatigue, the warning signs that whisper, "Slow down." But we don't slow down. We tell ourselves we're too busy, that we'll start eating better next month, that we'll exercise once things settle down, that we'll prioritize rest when we have more time. But more time never comes. And then, one day, we wake up, and our bodies feel different. Our steps are slower. Our energy fades more quickly. The things we once did without thinking, climbing stairs, bending down, going for a walk, suddenly require effort. At first, we brush it off. Then, we realize we should have cared sooner. Richard spent his entire life building a business. He was driven, ambitious, tireless, late nights at the office, early mornings at meetings, fast food eaten in the car between appointments. He called it sacrifice for success. And he was successful. By his 60s, he had everything he once dreamed of. But success came at a cost. At 72, Richard sat in his doctor's office, listening to words that he had feared but somehow expected. Your heart is weak. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. Your body can't keep up anymore. Richard swallowed hard, his fingers tightening on the edge of his chair. Can I fix this? He asked, his voice quiet, laced with regret. The doctor sighed and offered a small, sympathetic smile. You can slow it down. You can make the best of what you have left. But Richard, time is not something we can rewind. That night, he sat alone in his grand home, a house he had once dreamed of owning. Now nothing more than walls filled with silence. His success had bought him luxury. But luxury meant little when his body refused to cooperate. The fine wine in his cellar, worthless when his heart couldn't handle indulgence. The expensive mattress in his bedroom, useless when he spent more nights restless than rested. The wealth he had worked so hard for, it could buy him comfort, but not more time. And suddenly, he understood. He had traded years of his health for success. And now, all the success in the world couldn't buy back his health. Buddhism teaches us mindfulness of the body, the understanding that our physical form is impermanent, fragile, and worthy of care. We do not own our health. We borrow it. And if we do not care for it, it will leave us long before we are ready. Imagine an old woman in her garden, her hands working the soil, her breath steady and deep. She has never owned great riches, never built an empire, but she has walked every day, eaten nourishing food, rested when needed. And now, at 80, she moves with ease. She bends effortlessly to smell a flower, walks without pain, wakes up feeling light and free in her body. She may not have wealth in the way society defines it, but she has something far more valuable, the ability to enjoy the life she still has. Because true wealth is not in what we have, it is in how we feel. What good is financial success if your body aches with every step? What good is retirement if your health keeps you from enjoying it? What good is more time if you no longer have the energy to make use of it? We think of health as something we can postpone, but it is the foundation of everything else. Without it, even the greatest fortune becomes meaningless. Richard, sitting alone in his silent house, understood this too late. But you don't have to. If you have the ability to move, to breathe deeply, to enjoy a walk in the morning air, cherish it. If your hands are still steady, if your body still listens when you ask it to move, take care of it. Because one day, if we are not careful, we will wake up and realize we spent years chasing things that matter far less than simply feeling well enough to live fully. We don't have to wait until it's too late to understand this. Our bodies carry us through life. They deserve to be treated with the same dedication we give to our careers, our ambitions, and our plans for the future. Because without health, there is no future. So take care of yourself. Not tomorrow. Not next year. Now. 7. Relationships matter more than achievements. We spend so much of our lives chasing the things we think will bring us happiness, status, money, recognition. We tell ourselves that once we achieve enough, once we reach the next level, we'll finally be able to slow down and enjoy life. And while we are busy chasing, something happens. Birthdays come and go. Loved ones reach out. And we promise to catch up soon. We miss family dinners, cancel plans, and assume there will always be another opportunity. We convince ourselves that the people who matter most will understand, that they will wait for us, that there will be time later to reconnect. Until there isn't. John had always been a man of ambition. From the time he was young, he believed that success was the ultimate measure of a life well lived. He worked tirelessly, climbing the corporate ladder, always focused on the next big milestone. His wife, Lisa, used to wait up for him, hoping they could share dinner together. But work always came first. His children grew up seeing his absence more than his presence. He missed school plays, sports games, quiet evenings at home. His best friend, the one who had been there since childhood, had stopped inviting him to gatherings, assuming he was too busy. And he always was. There will be time, John told himself. Once I reach the next goal, I'll slow down. I'll make it up to them. But time is not something we can negotiate with. One evening, after decades of chasing success, John received a phone call. His best friend, the one he had always meant to catch up with, had passed away unexpectedly. The news hit him like a wave, knocking the breath from his lungs. He scrolled through his phone, staring at unanswered messages, missed calls, the empty spaces where conversations should have been, and the weight of regret settled in his chest like a stone. All those times he had meant to reach out, all those plans he had pushed aside, all those conversations that would now never happen. That night, John came home and found Lisa sitting alone in the living room, reading. She looked up and smiled, tired, but warm. He sat beside her, taking her hand, something he hadn't done in years. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Lisa didn't say anything right away. She just held his hand, as if she understood everything he meant in those two simple words. And in that moment, John saw everything clearly. He had spent his entire life building something he thought mattered, his career, his success, his legacy. But what was success without the people who loved him? What was the point of wealth if there was no one left to share it with? We think we have time. We think there will always be another chance to call, to visit, to say I love you. We think we can make up for lost moments later. But later is not guaranteed. How many people, at the end of their lives, say, "I wish I had worked more"? None. But how many whisper, "I wish I had spent more time with the people I love"? Too many. The greatest tragedy is not that time moves forward, it's that we don't realize what truly matters until it's too late. Imagine an elderly woman sitting at a quiet dinner table, looking at the empty chair where her husband once sat. For years, she had believed there would be more time. More time to take that trip together. More time to say I love you more often. More time to simply be. But time had moved forward, indifferent to her plans, leaving only memories and the ache of what could have been. John changed after that night. He left work earlier. He took Lisa on long walks, just to talk. He called his children, not to ask how work was going, but to ask about their lives. He reconnected with old friends. Not through emails or text messages, but over coffee, over laughter, over real moments shared. He learned, perhaps too late, but not too late, that achievements fade, but love remains. Because in the end, our success is not measured by what we have accomplished. It is measured by the people we have touched. The people in our lives are not guarantees. They are not something we can place on hold while we chase after other things. Don't wait until it's too late to cherish what truly matters. Put down your phone. Answer that message. Make the call. Show up, because no amount of success can ever replace the warmth of being there for the people who matter most. 8. True happiness comes from within. We spend our lives chasing happiness. We search for it in success, in wealth, in the approval of others. We tell ourselves that once we reach a certain milestone, once we earn enough, achieve enough, become enough, then, and only then, we will finally feel at peace. But that moment never truly comes. Each time we reach a goal, the satisfaction fades, and a new desire takes its place. The house that once felt like a dream now seems ordinary. The promotion we worked so hard for quickly becomes just another step on an endless ladder. The validation we seek from others lasts only until the next time we doubt ourselves. And so, we continue chasing. Margaret had spent her entire life believing that happiness was something to be attained. In her youth, she was convinced it came from achievement. She worked tirelessly, earning top grades, securing a prestigious job, proving her worth to the world. Later, she thought happiness could be found in material success. She bought the beautiful home, the designer clothes, the luxury vacations, each purchase bringing a fleeting thrill, but never lasting fulfillment. And when that didn't bring her peace, she turned to others. She sought happiness in relationships, in admiration, in the approval of colleagues and friends. She carefully crafted an image of success and stability, hoping that if others saw her as happy, perhaps she would finally feel it herself. But despite checking every box, despite building a life that should have made her happy, Margaret often found herself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, feeling an emptiness she couldn't explain. One day, while traveling in Japan, she visited a small Buddhist monastery hidden in the mountains. The monks welcomed her with warmth, their eyes filled with a quiet serenity she had never known. Curious, she approached one of them and asked, "What is the secret to happiness?" The monk smiled and handed her a small cup of tea. "Drink," he said. She lifted the cup to her lips and took a slow sip. "Did you enjoy it?" he asked. She hesitated, confused by the simplicity of the question. "Yes." It was warm, soothing. The monk nodded. "You found joy in something so simple. Yet you spent your whole life searching for happiness elsewhere. Why is that?" Margaret was stunned into silence. In that single moment, she understood. Happiness had never been in the things she had chased. It had never been in success, or wealth, or the approval of others. It had always been in the simple moments, the ones she had overlooked. The ones she had been too busy to appreciate. The warmth of the morning sun. The laughter of a friend. The feeling of fresh grass beneath her feet. The sip of a cup of tea. Enjoyed fully, without distraction, all her life. She had believed happiness was something she had to acquire. But true happiness isn't found, it is uncovered. It is not something waiting for us in the future. It is something we already have. If we only learn to recognize it. Imagine an old man sitting on a park bench, feeding the pigeons. He has no riches, no titles, no grand possessions, but as he watches the birds flutter around him, a soft smile spreads across his face, not a smile of achievement, but of contentment. He has learned the greatest lesson of all: happiness was never something to chase. It was something to feel. So many of us spend our lives in pursuit of happiness, unaware that it is already within us, waiting to be noticed. We tell ourselves, I'll be happy when I make more money, when I lose weight, when I find the right partner, when I retire. But happiness is not a destination. It is not a reward waiting at the end of a long, exhausting journey. It is found in this moment. Right now. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Feel the air filling your lungs. That is life. That is something to be grateful for. That is enough. Stop searching. Start feeling. Because everything you've been looking for is already within you. 9. The gift of wisdom, seeing life clearly. There comes a moment in life when everything becomes clear. Not in a sudden, dramatic revelation, but in a quiet, undeniable realization. It often arrives when we are older. When life forces us to slow down. When the rush of ambition settles into reflection. It is not a moment of regret. Nor is it sadness. It is simply understanding. The understanding that we spent far too much time worrying about things that never truly mattered. That we wasted years chasing approval, collecting things, holding grudges, and waiting for happiness to arrive, when it was always right in front of us. This is the wisdom that comes with time. And the greatest tragedy is not that we learn it late in life, but that so many of us never learn it at all. Margaret had spent her entire life believing that happiness was something she had to achieve. In her youth, she was certain it came from academic success. If she could just get the best grades, she would be happy. In her 30s, she thought it was tied to a high-paying job. If she could just earn more money, she would be happy. In her 40s and 50s, she convinced herself it would come from financial security, from status, from making the right choices. But despite doing everything right, something always felt missing. She had followed the blueprint for success. Yet deep down, she felt a quiet emptiness. A feeling she couldn't quite explain. Then, in her late 60s, Margaret took a trip to a small coastal village in Vietnam. It was supposed to be just another vacation, another trip to check off her list. But something about this place was different. One afternoon, as she walked through the village, she noticed an old woman sitting on the front steps of a tiny home, peeling fruit in the afternoon sun. She was barefoot, her skin wrinkled from years of laughter and labor. Her clothes were simple, her home modest, and yet, she radiated something Margaret had spent her entire life chasing but had never found: contentment. Margaret watched her for a while, drawn in by the peace in her face. The way she moved slowly, and deliberately, as if there was no rush. Finally, she approached and asked, "Are you happy?" The old woman chuckled, amused by the question. "Why wouldn't I be?" she replied, taking a bite of fruit and offering Margaret a piece. Margaret hesitated, then accepted. As she chewed, she felt the warmth of the sun on her skin. She heard the distant laughter of children playing. She smelled the salt in the breeze. And for the first time in decades, she stopped thinking about what came next. She just was. And in that moment, she realized that was enough. Happiness was never something to be achieved. It was something to be felt. She had spent decades searching for something that had been available to her all along. Buddhism teaches that wisdom is not about accumulating knowledge, it is about awakening to what is already true. The truth that life is not measured by what we own, but by the moments we live fully. That success is not about status, but about how we show up for others. That happiness is not waiting in the future, it is found in the present. Most of us go through life convinced that if we can just get there, we will finally feel complete. But where is there? We tell ourselves, once I retire, I'll finally enjoy life. Once I make enough money, I'll feel secure. Once I find the right person, I'll be happy. But life does not wait. How many people reach the end of their lives and realize they were always waiting for happiness to begin? Imagine an old man sitting on a park bench, feeding pigeons. He has no great riches, no grand titles, no urgent business meetings. But as he watches the birds flutter around him, he smiles. Not because he achieved everything he wanted, but because he finally understands what matters. The gift of wisdom is simple. Live now. Love now. Be present now. Because this moment, this very moment, is all you ever truly have. Time is the greatest teacher, but it is also the most unforgiving. It moves forward, indifferent to our plans, never pausing, never granting us the chance to relive the moments we let slip away. We spend so much of our lives waiting for the right time, the right circumstances, the perfect opportunity. We tell ourselves we'll slow down later. We'll prioritize what truly matters later. We'll start living fully later. But later is a fragile promise, one that life does not always keep. Why wait until 70 to see clearly? Why wait until we are looking back to realize that happiness was never in the distant future, but in the small, ordinary moments we overlooked? That true wealth was never in what we owned, but in the love we gave. That success was never about status, but about who we became along the way. We don't have to wait. We can start now. Take a deep breath. Look around. Right here. In this very moment, you have something priceless, the ability to choose, the ability to live with intention, to let go of what no longer serves you, to embrace what truly matters, because the only time that is ever guaranteed is now. So start today. If something has been weighing on your heart, release it. If there is someone you love, tell them. If there is a dream you've been postponing, take the first step. If you have been waiting for happiness to arrive, stop waiting. It is already here. Life is not meant to be spent in regret, in hesitation, in someday. It is meant to be lived fully, deeply, completely, right now. And as you reflect on these 9 truths, I'd love to hear from you. Which of these resonated with you the most? Which one do you wish you had understood sooner? Or, if you're just beginning this journey, which lesson do you feel inspired to embrace today? Leave a comment below. Your thoughts might just inspire someone else who needs to hear them. And if this message spoke to you, if you felt even a small shift in perspective, share this video with someone who might need it. 2. Because sometimes, all it takes is a single moment of clarity to change a life. Thank you for watching, for being here, for taking the time to reflect on what truly matters. And if you'd like more wisdom and insight to guide you on this journey, don't forget to subscribe. Let's walk this path together, with clarity, purpose, and the courage to truly live.